Hello, everyone. This is Mike Morneau from Learning Times. We are going to get started in about 20 minutes at the top of the hour. And so hopefully you can hear my voice. We're just doing a sound test at this time. And as I said, we will get started at the top of the hour, so about 20 minutes from now. We look forward to getting this session underway. In the meantime, you will not be hearing anything. There's no audio being broadcast after this point. Thank you. Good morning, Sharon. How are you today?
Good morning, Mike. I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It is much too early in the morning, however.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yes, more so for you. I shouldn't complain. Sorry.
At least I didn't have to leave the house or be on camera.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm just trying to wrangle the captioners. There was a miscommunication.
Okay.
But I did get everything, so your slides are up. So I'm going to start off with an intro, of course, and then I'll turn it over to you, flip the slides over to your deck of slides. I've got the downloadable resources/materials, and there may or may not be a closed captioning pod that appears at the bottom of the screen if the captioner comes. I can see that they're connected. We're trying to determine where they're connected to. Because I can see that I've got another console that says captioner present, but they're not logged in and they're not dialed in, so I'm not sure if they're simply present spirit or however.
There you go. Is my phone, is my volume up right? Or man,
Yeah.
Good thing I'm speaking from written notes today, so good thing my brain doesn't have to create sentences.
Okay. No, you sound good. If there's anything, I'll let you know in the presenter-only chat. And there's a possibility that you'll see two other people join us in the presenter chat. Those are my clients with Northern Virginia Community College. They're not sure if they're logging in or dialing in, I mean.
Okay. Oh, and then on the questions, I wrote some notes on the questions people had sent in advance that I have just kind of printed out in front of me.
Perfect.
I know you said you were going to put their questions onto the parking lot, and were you planning to alert me if you think I should stop and respond to something? I forgot to ask how you wanted to do that.
It's up to you. If you want to do your presentation and then do Q&A, that's fine. But if you want to take breaks in the meantime, like sort of at certain intervals to address certain points, that's perfectly fine as well. There's no sort of real right or wrong kind of way to do it from that aspect, but it's simply a matter of ensuring that we don't go over time and that we obviously don't end sort of too soon, but you know what I mean. It's sort of whatever works well for you from a flow standpoint.
Okay. So what I'm thinking, going in position, is I'll go straight through. If it feels like I'm getting too far ahead, maybe there is a good place to pause, but it might be good to just wait to the end, because sometimes, I can be long-winded and then 5 minutes are gone.
No problem.
So I didn't put any specific break points in here. Just depends on how fast I talk.
Yeah, well, no problem there. Okay, sorry, just got an email from the client.
Okay.
God, I got a lot of people are logging in multiple times. It's going to be an issue.
Well, I think I did that from using multiple browsers the other day when I wasn't sure if they were working.
That does happen. And sometimes you get people who'll do it 3 or 4 times, and it's not that big of a deal if the audio's entirely over the phone. If they're listening over the computer, which they are, it's going to be a problem for them.
Oh,
and then it just ends up being more sort of unnecessary work for, like, tech support-wise. That's fine. I'll just do a little quick intro or a little notification of it here at the beginning. Okay. Okay, the captioner is trying to dial in. Okay, I'm just going to turn on the audio. Our audio is going to be live for the next minute. So just keep that in mind and make sure your computer speakers are turned off or muted, please. And so I'm just going to say something because we're at the top of the hour. Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Morneau. I'm with Learning Times. We are going to hold off for about another 5 minutes. Many participants are logging in at this time, and so we just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to get settled in. I can see that many people who are joining us today are logged in multiple times, and so that's going to result in a less than desirable audio reception for you. So we will start to close off the additional logins. However, if you do find that you do have an echo, please feel free to close off any extra logins that you may be already aware of. And so as I said, we're going to delay the start of the webinar for about 5 minutes, just until everybody can get started and get settled. Thank you. So we'll start momentarily. Okay, starting momentarily and starting in 5 minutes is a little different, but my coffee's just not kicking in this morning. And yes, I'm happy that I did not have that broadcasting. God, I've done that mistake many times.
I know.
It's like those bloopers that you see on TV with, so-and-so on the news thought they went to commercial break.
Oh. I know. I'm very paranoid about that sort of thing, except when I am oblivious.
Okay, so we've got Dana Brantley from Nova. I've got her in as a presenter right now. And we have Kara Newhouse as well, who is now a presenter. Okay, good. Most of the multiple logins are all out. So there's, let's see how many people. 202 registrations.
Ah,
So we'll probably get about between 40 and 60 people live.
that's extra good of them, considering they can look at the recording.
Exactly. Come on. Where is the captioner?
We could just live stream you pretending to do sign language or something.
Come on. Are you okay to go over a few minutes, if to sort of make up the time for the hour, if possible, Sharon?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay. that email go? Okay, if I don't believe the captioner is dialed in yet. However, if they are, is there a way that if you're there, can you please somehow let me know?
Mike, I think you're supposed to be humming elevator music right now.
I can try to hum my best Kenny G. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with or without the captions. So I'm going to turn on the audio. So we're going to be live, and anything that you say at this point will be heard, okay?
Can and will be held against me.
No, I'm not like that. Okay, so we're going to be live in 3, 2. Hello and welcome everyone to CCI Live virtual events for CCI alumni. My name is Mike Morneau. I am with Learning Times and I'll be your technical producer today. Before we get the session started, I'd like to first of all thank you for your patience as we were trying to resolve a small technical issue. And hopefully you can all hear us now. There are a few people who are logged in multiple times that may result in a less than desirable audio situation. If you do encounter problems with audio or general connectivity with Adobe Connect, please communicate with me directly using the technical questions box that you see on the left of your screen beneath the Department of State logo. Beneath that, in the general chat, you can feel free to submit questions at any point in time for Dr. Wallace to respond to during today's session. However, please note that all of these questions that have been submitted or questions that are going to be submitted will be addressed at the end of the session during a dedicated Q&A. So as I mentioned, welcome to CCI Live virtual events for CCI alumni. This online event for Community College Initiative Program alumni is brought to you by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs and Northern Virginia Community College and is produced by Learning Times. Today's webcast is the third in a series of 8 webcasts designed to inspire ongoing personal and professional development for CCI alumni. Today's webcast is titled Emotional Intelligence at Work: How Understanding Emotions Can Help You Improve Yourself and Your Team, and is presented by Dr. Sharon Wallace. Sharon, you can go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sharon Wallace, and I look forward to introducing you to the topic of emotional intelligence at work and how this can help you improve yourself and your team. This is the essence of this thing that we call emotional intelligence. That is, we all have emotions, and that we shouldn't let our emotions control us, that the emotions experienced by other people are as valid as our own, and that we can improve our relationships by becoming better attuned to the emotions of others. That goes for work relationships as well as home and other communities. So emotions can be defined as states of physiological arousal accompanied by changes in facial expressions, gestures, postures, and subjective feeling. This includes things like tone of voice, speaking faster or slower, loudness, and silences. This also includes body language, but as we'll discuss later, it's important to understand the limitations of reading too much into body language. Emotions play an important role at the workplace, and that is as much because they can get out of control as it is because most people are under the mistaken impression that managing emotions means learning to suppress completely or ignore them. So what are we talking about when we speak of emotions? Sometimes a list is helpful. Think particularly about emotional states that may be useful, hurtful, or counterproductive in a work setting. All emotions are legitimate, and there are legitimate circumstances to show happiness, grief, even anger. In psychotherapy or psychotherapeutic language, we talk about appropriate emotions and appropriate reactions and authenticity to yourself, as well as determining whether or when to let others know your emotions. For example, sometimes you need to let people know that you're angry, versus other times, obviously, you have to know when to keep it to yourself. And moods are more subtle forms of emotions and they can influence our behavior and attitudes below the radar. Moods can be contagious. I can remember a joyous occasion at work one time when we were giving someone a farewell party because she was transferring to our London office. When the manager arrived, he was somewhat withdrawn. He was quiet. His eyes were more toward the floor than making eye contact. And I can remember that I started to feel a little bit shaky. I couldn't figure out why. Later that afternoon, I asked him how he was doing, and he told me he'd just learned that our division was going to let about half the people go. And he didn't want to ruin this celebration, but his mood bled through, and I was able to actually catch that mood. So emotional labor is defined as managing emotions in order to perform your job. This may require us to do things like enhancing, faking, suppressing our emotions to modify what others see. We learn to do this by observing how others behave and by how authority figures reward and punish, first when we're growing up, and then in the workplace by both formal and informal training. Managing emotions is a stressful activity that can be exhausting and can even cause burnout because emotions and moods are always with us, and emotional triggers can appear at any time. Our emotional labor doesn't just come from managing our own emotions. It's also something that we can experience through empathy. Studies show that employees who observe coworkers being treated unfairly sometimes increase their own emotional labor even though they themselves were being treated justly on an individual basis. I see a message there about, is my voice clear now?
Yes, your voice is fine.
Okay, great. Emotional intelligence has been defined as the ability to manage one's own emotions and those of others in order to guide one's behavior and achieve goals. Managing the emotions of others does not mean controlling or manipulating other people. It's much more about how you deal with their emotions yourself, whether you can be of service to them, to help them calm down, to show sympathy, to help diffuse dangerous anger. In a work setting, we're talking about how managing our own emotions and tuning into those of others can help achieve organizational goals. And on an individual level, this is as much about self-care as it is about self-preservation. So emotional intelligence includes the ability to be self-aware of feelings, to manage emotions, to motivate ourselves, to express sympathy, and handle relationships with others. High emotional intelligence, when put to good use, may help people gain success at work. It's also useful for motivating other people, fostering a trusting environment, and engaging cooperation. It also helps people adapt to change and make better decisions. So it certainly helps us to be more effective at work, but it does not guarantee all forms of success. I think we've all experienced successful people who are absolute nightmares to be around. Some may lack empathy, they may be bullies. We've all dealt with high-pressure salespeople. So it's not a guarantee of great wealth and reward, but emotional intelligence will likely help most people achieve more success than they would if they allowed their emotions to run away with them or blind to the feelings of others. And it certainly helps us maintain our own sanity and live more fully and authentically in the world. As we mature, our emotional intelligence tends to increase. So as children, we learn that we can't get away with throwing tantrums forever. And in the workplace, we learn more subtle and sophisticated ways to manage ourselves, to pay attention to others, and develop skills that demonstrate our trustworthiness, dependability, expertise, and compassion. Interestingly, emotional intelligence may actually decrease when a person moves from middle to senior management. It doesn't mean it's less important. but the unwritten rules are different at the higher echelons of companies. Highly compensated people with a lot of power are not subject to the same basic rules people have to follow at the lower levels. So when you're treated like a rock star, there is a tendency to believe it's true. When people take that too far, they're sometimes kicked out because they can harm the company's reputation and cause it to lose business. Other times, we just have some difficult people at the top. A little bit of history now. In 1990, the research team of J.D. Mayer and Peter Salovey posited the idea of emotional intelligence as a parallel to cognitive intelligence, or what we call IQ. Daniel Goleman is a management theorist who's written a number of books on the subject of emotional intelligence. I will include those in a list for you at the end of today's webinar, and I believe it's also, it's called recommended reading. It's the top download in the download window. So Goleman takes the term emotional intelligence in a new direction compared to the original research by applying it to management theory in business. And he explores and elaborates on the idea that a person's emotional intelligence is a potential that must be accompanied by skill development in order to translate into on-the-job success. He started out with a many-faceted model in 1998, and after he did quite a bit more research, he simplified it to the four-dimensional framework that we're going to go through today. A little bit more on what emotional intelligence is. So the original researchers, Mayer and Salovey, determined that emotional intelligence does indeed exist as a form of intelligence, and they defined it as the capacity to reason about emotions and emotional information, and of emotions to enhance thought. They determined that people with high emotional intelligence could solve emotion-related problems accurately and quickly. In one example, they determined that people with high emotional intelligence could accurately perceive emotions from looking at a person's face. The researchers also determined that people with high emotional intelligence could understand meanings that emotions convey. For example, that angry people can be dangerous, or that people who are sad want to be alone, or that people who are more likely to accept an invitation to a party when they're happy than they would be if they were sad or afraid. They determined that emotional intelligence is important because it expands our notions of intelligence, it helps us predict important life outcomes, and it can be used to help people find the right work and relationships for themselves. Now, emotional intelligence should not be confused with always positive, go along and get along behaviors employed by the meek or overly enthusiastic. An emotionally intelligent person knows that optimism is not appropriate in every situation. Emotional intelligence in itself is not motivation, it's not a need for achievement, and it's not a need for self-control. It is also not proven to be an automatic predictor of success. There are many jobs that require high levels of technical skills, above self-awareness, and relationship skills, for example. Very importantly, as with many lenses that we use to understand or describe the diverse ways that different people's minds work, emotional intelligence is not an appropriate measure to screen job candidates or to evaluate job performance across the board. It's important to understand that emotional intelligence is just one component of our more complex selves. Although it's a useful lens and discussion tool, it's not the only factor that comes into play for success at work, organizational effectiveness, or relationships with others. At this point, there are numerous emotional intelligence frameworks, EQ assessments, and whatnot, but Daniel Goleman's 4x4 model is perhaps the best known, most popular, and the easiest to understand. So that's why we're going to be going through this today. Looking at the column headings, we have two categories that deal with ourselves, self-awareness and self-management. And we have two categories that deal with the social awareness and relationship management. The two row headings are recognition and regulation. Recognition includes self-awareness, in other words, recognizing certain things about our own emotions. And social awareness, which is about recognizing the emotions of other people. In terms of self-awareness, people with greater emotional intelligence are more aware of their own emotions. This enables them to behave in a manner that supports what they're feeling. If, for example, I know that I enjoy working on technical projects, then I can act on that understanding by seeking out more technical projects to work on. In terms of social awareness, someone with higher emotional intelligence will be better at showing empathy or relating to other people. They're more likely to meet other people's needs and understand the group's needs as well. So an emotionally intelligent manager may let someone work from home while they're caring for a sick family member. They're just more attuned to the feelings of other people. Regarding self-management, in the workplace, we need to demonstrate the ability to moderate our emotions so we behave in a manner that's appropriate to the work situation, even when our emotions are triggered or heightened, and we feel like throwing something or hiding out. Two behaviors that can be destructive to getting the work done and coming across as someone who works well under pressure and can be trusted. On relationship management, we don't have much choice on this one. We need to maintain good working relationships with our colleagues, our peers, our teammates, our subordinates, and our superiors. That means effective communication, and so active listening skills, understanding what other people need, providing adequate support, as well as doing our part for a collaborative work environment. Feeling connected with others at work leads to a more productive and respectful work environment. And it's just human nature to want that connection. Everyone wants to belong and feel they're part of something larger than themselves. So emotional competence, this is coming back to Goleman, is the learned capability based on emotional intelligence that results in outstanding performance at work. What Goleman is saying here is that having the underlying intelligence, our emotional intelligence, is not enough. We have to build skills that leverage our emotional intelligence in performing specific aspects of our jobs. This way, we are effectively translating our emotional intelligence into work skills. For example, a good salesperson needs to have some understanding of the customer's needs and good relationship awareness, but that's not sufficient to negotiate prices and close the deal. So there are other skills required by the specific job that are fueled by emotional intelligence. So diving deeper now into each quadrant, we'll start with emotional self-awareness. This has to do with how well we can detect and identify our own emotional state and understand what it means to us individually. Can I accurately name the emotion I'm feeling and not confuse it with what I think I'm supposed to feel? Part of the way we get there is by paying attention to what it's like when we feel that way. Let's say I suddenly feel cold. My eyes open very wide. I'm holding very still but poised to move quickly if I need to. This could be what it feels like when I'm afraid or feeling vigilant, anticipating something bad or physically dangerous is about to happen. Some people become paralyzed with fear, whereas others may perceive fear as a reason to prepare for some particular action. The move from emotional intelligence to competence is having learned the appropriate skill to channel that emotion into some work-related action. For example, if I see the clock and I fear I may miss my train to work and show up late, I might hurry up and get myself out the door. Now that's a simple example. But what about when something happens at work that triggers my anger? If I'm in tune with what it feels like when I am becoming angry, then I can catch myself and moderate my behavior to something more appropriate to this situation, rather than blowing up at my best employee, either getting myself fired or frightening that employee into quitting their job, or both. It's important to note that showing anger may be the appropriate response in a particular situation, even at work, but it must be a conscious decision based on what we've learned about the job and our own workplace. So developing self-awareness means identifying the emotions sooner each time and getting better skilled at acting on it. So what about a healthy persona? A persona is the mask or presentation of ourselves that we show the world. The emotionally intelligent person understands what is required and appropriate to a particular situation. A police officer must be tough but just. A teacher must be knowledgeable but interested in sharing that knowledge. A therapist must be able to diagnose but allow the client or patient to find their way to the correct understanding. The boss needs to demonstrate authority. Flight attendants shouldn't give us scary weather details when there's nothing we can do about it anyway. And doctors shouldn't scare us out of going back for lab tests, that sort of thing. The second component of a healthy persona is knowing the difference between the character I need to present to be recognized in my job and who I really am, or how I really feel on the inside. Not too many of us are wealthy and powerful enough to walk around exposing our most extreme emotions without worrying about the consequences. So for the rest of us, it's important to know when we're scared out of our minds, even when our jobs require us to remain visibly calm for the sake of others. Now, we all deceive ourselves from time to time, and others will help us out with that. The more successful you are, the more you have to worry about getting inaccurate information from sycophants and other kinds of hangers-on who are not there to support your development, even employees who just fear you. So even though self-awareness contributes to our self-confidence, that must be within reason so we don't become egomaniacs. This means we need to make an accurate assessment of our strengths and weaknesses and continue working on building our skills. That development in turn increases our self-confidence. Another important area involves paying attention to how others influence our emotional states. We use this skill to get out of dangerous situations and keep away from toxic people in the workplace. Self-awareness is a basis for asking for what we want because we have clarity that it's something we actually want and not just something the crowd is influencing or pressuring us into. We need to understand how we come across to others as well. We need to make sure that our body language matches what we're trying to present. Going back to the example of the manager I mentioned earlier, even though it was subtle, his body language was not that of someone celebrating at a fun lunch party. He gave himself away there. There are times when you need people to believe that you're listening to them, so you must appear open and use things like visual affirmations like nodding your head yes as they're speaking to show you understand and are paying attention. Going to social awareness, empathy is a very important capability, but it's never about diagnosing the other person. We can only hypothesize what the other person might be feeling when we pick up on subtle or not so subtle cues. Think about reading body language here. The other person starts shaking or sweating. Maybe their face becomes flushed. That doesn't automatically mean they're angry. They could be having a heart attack or a bad reaction to some food they ate. Maybe there's something going on at home that's troubling them and they were just triggered by something. So it also means we can't take their emotions personally because they may not be directed at us. And even though we notice a change, we can't really assume that we understand what it means. We may assume they're angry, but we may need to test that hypothesis and examine the feedback we get from testing it. So the relating aspect is like a dance. If a person seems sad, you may attempt to console them only to find they're feeling something else. If you don't change your approach based on that feedback, then you're out of step with them. If they appear sad, you can relate by remembering times when you felt sadness, and it will resonate with you. So we're talking about picking up on the mood in the room, caring what others are going through, and hearing what the other person is really saying when you echo that back to them. So understanding in this sense is the ability to translate what the other person's emotions mean. You're able to connect the dots, for example, between a person feeling sad now and something that happened to them earlier. Social awareness is not just about being attuned to another person's emotions. It's also true for organizations. This is where we can use emotional intelligence to become politically astute. This is particularly useful when you're not in a high position of authority, but still need to influence people. Now, before we even get to managing relationships, we can begin to act on our social awareness. In service industries and jobs, it's important to understand the customer's needs and concerns. A great social example came up the other day. In a group I was in, someone asked how they could be a good ally to women and people of color. The answer was, don't make assumptions about what they need. Ask them first. Ask them what they need. This is equally true in business situations. Although we should call on our empathy to anticipate possible needs of our clients, we also need to test our assumptions, and we do well by finding ways to ask them. And forgiveness is also important. Just as trust is something that we give first and is not something that has to be earned, so it is with forgiveness. Before you can be in a meaningful relationship with others, you have to understand that they are not always going to be great at managing their own emotions either. So we use our empathy there as well. Self-management is about managing or moderating our internal emotional states, including things like impulse control. There is a children's book by Heidi McKinnon called I Just Ate My Friend. It's about a friendly monster who accidentally ate his best friend. Excuse me. He spends most of the book trying to find a new friend, but he gets no takers until the end when someone finally says, I'll be a friend. Then gulp. Then the new character says, I just ate my friend. Is anyone having trouble reading the emotion in that cover picture of that book? Okay, back to the business world. Goleman tells us that emotional self-control manifests as the absence of distress and disruptive feelings, like being unfazed in stressful situations or dealing with a hostile person without lashing out in return. Or, remembering that your friends are not your food. People who feel they have some control over their lives or situations experience less stress. So the self-management aspect of your emotional intelligence can be used to manage your stress levels, which affects your physical and mental health in a positive way. It's also important to express your emotions appropriately. To show the emotion you need to show. Sometimes it is appropriate to show our anger, not as uncontrolled rage, but enough to let the people know they've crossed a boundary. The self-management dimension of emotional intelligence reflects a balancing act between our own needs and the demands of a particular situation. For example, we can show trustworthiness by clarifying our values and demonstrating that we adhere to them in our behavior. We can show that we have resilience or strength under pressure, but there again, we must be aware of our own limitations and not cross our own boundary at our own peril. We want to show that we're gracious, conscientious, and achievement-oriented when we're trying to impress the boss and get ahead at work, but we must always know our limitations so that we can strike that balance between what we need and the sometimes infinite demands of people and organizations. Using emotional intelligence to demonstrate leadership is another key to effective relationship management. Leaders develop others, which involves tuning in to their developmental needs and helping them build skills and self-confidence. Although leaders are also often in positions of authority, Leadership can also be demonstrated by one's ability to influence others, regardless of the power dynamic. I often refer to this again as a dance because influencers pay close attention to how others react and quickly correct their approach to remain in step or in sync while moving toward their goal. Goleman cautions that attempts to use emotional intelligence to influence others carries the risk of manipulation. To mitigate this, he tempers his approach with the need to be genuine and place collective goals before self-interest. Leadership also involves the ability to manage conflict effectively, and that includes introducing constructive or functional conflict when a group's energy has gone or they've become stuck trying to make a decision but they can't think of any new ideas. Leaders should also act as a positive force for change. Many efforts to create large-scale change in organizations fail, from implementing new computer systems to shifts in behavior or radically different culture or work processes. They fail for a number of reasons, but too often it's due to the missed opportunity of not using emotional intelligence to create the best change given the people you have and tapping into the best way to influence them to embrace the change based on what you know or can learn about them. Study after study shows that behaving in an ethical manner and fostering positive and productive working relationships and generally improving in the so-called soft skills brought into the business world by the social sciences yield greater success for organizations. Organizations make more money, efficiency is increased, creativity is increased, communication improves, dysfunctional conflict is reduced, and the best employees want to stay. Collaboration doesn't mean dumping the grunt work onto people you don't like. It truly means learning how to work collaboratively with others. And to do that, it helps to work on those critical relationship skills. Healthy work relationships are positive and supportive as well. When someone comes to you with an idea, hear them out. Tell them what you like about it. Let them know you appreciate their sharing it with you. When someone shares an idea with you, they're often hoping that you will add something to it so that you're building something together. This is something you can learn to listen for, whether they're looking for validation or praise or a thinking partner or permission or something else. There are many ways to show support, but you need to test your assumptions about what they might be seeking. Very few people share an idea hoping you will critique them. That's not usually the best path to start with. Would wait for that invitation. Finally, we return to what relationship is about. As humans, we want to feel a sense of belonging. Feelings of connectedness help us feel respected. They help us feel a certain freedom to focus on doing our work rather than being distracted by worry or fear. Feelings of team spirit make us feel loyal and devoted to the goals of our group. We're willing to make sacrifices, such as working some extra hours to meet a deadline. We're less likely to grumble and question the person who set the deadline as being unrealistic or incompetent. Instead, we're more energized about getting our project across the finish line. There's something else very positive about the power of the group. It is the only thing that can stand up to and defeat bullies and other abusers. When the group stands together as one and refuses to tolerate abuses or unethical behaviors, they can be much more easily exorcised from the organization. So going back to Goleman's four-dimensional framework, as a reminder on the recognition axis, emotional intelligence is about understanding our own emotional states and becoming aware of the emotional states of others. On the regulation axis, emotional intelligence is about learning to manage ourselves in such a way that our emotional states do not get us into trouble. And it's about managing relationships with others more effectively. In most approaches where psychological theory is applied, whether it's psychotherapy, conflict resolution, or approaches to managing change in organizations, we always begin with self-awareness before moving to the social. Why is that? It's because we can never truly know what goes on in another person's mind, and we can certainly never control them. It's best to work first from what we know. And that means getting to know ourselves and how we may come across to other people first. Then we do our best to get to know others and create healthy and functional relationships with them. A genuine desire to do that comes from our own capacity for empathy and self-acceptance. From there, we have to learn to trust others to tell us what they need and show them support rather than trying to second guess and force our own ideas onto them. And remember that emotional intelligence is the capacity for these things, but emotional competence is a level of skill we've developed for putting that capability to constructive use. So just a few things to think about. Again, appropriate use. Remember that emotional intelligence is most appropriately used by the individual or by a properly guided group intervention in which all members have agreed to participate. So you can't just use an EQ test to hire and fire people, or place the results in the hands of line managers who are, of course, not qualified to conduct clinical diagnoses, counseling, or psychotherapy. Those things all require the agreement of the individual in any case. No matter how good you think you are at picking up on other people's emotions, don't assume you're right. It's always a working hypothesis that must be tested. You get that feedback and use it to change your approach until you're in sync with the other person. Finally, attitudes and behaviors are not always about emotions. You could be encountering a clash of personal style, personality type, unwritten cultural norms. You could just have miscommunicated, or there may be a disconnect in managing expectations. So we never want to just assume that something comes down to only one area. And with that, we move on to the question segment.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Sharon. That was a lot of information to mull over. So we're pulling up some questions here. And this was a question that had been submitted in advance of the session from Mohammed in Pakistan, asking for suggestions on how to improve self-awareness, but how to differentiate between sympathy and empathy.
So on the first one, ideas to help improve your self-awareness. Again, some of these things are something like mindfulness meditation is helpful when we're trying to figure out what is the experience of a certain emotion like when I'm having it. So I know I just blew up at someone at work. Did my temperature go up? You know, what am I? And then go back and do some mindfulness meditation on that. Take some notes so that the next time it happens, you feel it coming on and you can stop yourself from blowing up sooner. Another way is to work with a coach who helps you develop skills. You can use assessments like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, their conflict styles, team roles assessments, job interest inventories. Could even seek therapy or analysis. That's generally what these things are for, is to understand yourself better and help navigate any issues you may be having better. And differentiating between sympathy and empathy. So sympathy is more about acknowledging and showing support for the other person's emotions. So showing sympathy might include feeling sorry and pity for someone who's going through a tough time, or showing sympathy by giving them time off for grief when a loved one dies. Empathy is the ability to step into the other person's place or their shoes, as it were, because you recognize the emotional state and you feel it with them. But that's one of those things where empathy is one of the things that brings us together. Foundation for resolving conflict when we can see each other as all part of the same species.
We have another question from Claudia in Sao Paulo, asking what can we do about being like a Ferrari, so going from 0 to 100 in a few seconds because your manager is blind about your overall tasks and responsibilities, and not aware of all of that you're doing, and as a result giving you poor feedback at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's always a difficult problem because they assign you, they overload you with all this work, and you kill yourself doing it, knock yourself out doing it, and then they downgrade you for looking sleepy. Why are you so exhausted all the time? And some of that has to do, some of this has to do, of course, with governance and the company itself. What are the agreed rules for employee feedback and how those things are supposed to work? And then others have to do with using your emotional intelligence to, as the subordinate, to work on building a relationship with that manager, or using that to decide whether you feel safe confronting them, standing up for them yourself, challenging them, and if it's something particularly bad, reporting them.
Okay, thank you. Anna from India asks, supposing that the majority of the group is just sort of opposite to one's own thoughts and ideas, how can we manage the internal conflict like despair which can arise from that?
So when you're saying that they're the opposite, is it more they have sort of an opposite perspective or outlook, or that you're actually in opposite emotional states?
The way that I read the question that came in, I'm interpreting that it's a difference of thoughts and opinions. They're taking an opposite stance.
Well, I think that's one of the ways, situations where you can use something like emotional intelligence or some of these other lenses to depersonalize that conflict and understand the difference between liking, disliking each other and your emotions versus actually coming from a different perspective, actually having a different point of view. And so it's quite helpful to use that to actually, you can say that specifically, let's depersonalize this, take the us and them out of it, and just look at the actual issues we're talking about and examine the assumptions that we're making about them. And that is a way of sort of calming the situation. So you would use that relationship, the social awareness and relationship management, to try and take the personal side out of the conflict and bring it into more of an objective space. And sometimes you need to bring in a third person if there's big conflict happening. It helps to bring in a third party who's considered neutral to act as a go-between.
That's great. Thank you very much for that elaboration. We have a question from Asma in Egypt, asking if you could define and further explain the word persona that you referred to in earlier in the webinar.
Yes. Okay. And actually, that word is being used differently in tech circles, software tech circles these days, so that can get confusing as well. But our persona is actually a healthy face we show to the world that is a specific pattern that people may need to recognize. If you are a parent, you need to be an authority figure to your children. You need to also be a nurturer to your children. Whether you're feeling like that at the moment or not, whether you feel equipped for it or not, they need to see that pattern. So a persona, going along with a particular role as a manager or as a subordinate, you need to, it's expected, the person on the receiving end of your behavior, of your mask, is expecting a certain pattern of behavior from you. And so when you show that to them, they recognize it and they feel safe and comfortable. So when we do different types of jobs, and obviously in different job areas, there are different styles expected. That's why sometimes I use a police officer as an authority figure who's also supposed to be keeping the peace. So there's certain expectations of it. And so it's on the one hand, it's a mask. It's not necessarily our inner nature. So you may be a new parent and your inner nature was you never thought you'd be that authority figure to anyone, and suddenly you're having to do it. So it's a mask we can put on, but we know, and let's go back to the police officer. Maybe the police officer is also a poet and a folk musician, but they've got to put on that authority figure mask to be taken seriously and to do their role. If we confuse who we really are with the mask we're wearing, we lose our sense of our real nature and our true self, and we can get lost. But the mask itself is a healthy way of functioning and relating to others, so functioning in the social. Does that help?
It does seem to be a lot clearer to myself, yes, thank you. And yes, asthma indicates that, yes, it does help as well. So that's great. Thank you very much. Okay. We have a question, a submission here from Nereline in Natal. And she starts off with an expression that she had a situation at work that one of her colleagues told her that she seemed to be communicating stress in her body language, and having to do many things at the same time, simultaneously, heavy workload, etc. How can one deal with that? As to can you offer any tips or suggestions on how best to deal or address the issue of what you may be communicating through body language, even though it's unintentional? Sorry.
Yeah, but that's a difficult one. It's a good example, and we had this comedy TV series in the U.S., Jerry Seinfeld, where there was a character who was an extremely lazy person who didn't ever want to do any work. And his friends asked him, how do you get away with that? And he said, well, here's what I do. I walk around with a stack of papers in my hand. I mess up my hair. I pace around quickly and look really worried. So they think I'm stressed out and very busy. So he was putting on the act of being stressed and overworked, so everyone believed he was working very hard. In your case, you really are working very hard. And perhaps you're showing your stress. And so the question is that helpful? Is that causing others to show you support? Or is that something that you want to learn how to tone down when you're just trying to get your work done? Maybe they're reading too much into it. So you may, again, want to, journaling really helps with this. So you may want to just sit down and think about, and sometimes there are exercises looking in the mirror, but think about how it feels when you're at work. Did you feel as stressed as the other person perceived? And what sorts of body language give that away? Walking too fast, turning sharply, putting things down quickly, having crumpled papers, whatever they were picking up on. If you need to not be telegraphing that, then it helps. And again, we always talk about, first you have to figure out what it looks like and feels like, and then catch it sooner and sooner. So that if you're going to need to moderate it, or at least how it appears, first you have to become aware of it and what it looks like. Then you have to think about, well, what can I do that looks different? Do I need to just walk more slowly? Do I need to spend a little more time with people? Not just rush off and, what sort of signals do you need to give them differently so that this is not held against you in some way? Or if you actually need to delegate work or ask for help, is there a way to do it that doesn't make it look like you're overwhelmed? If that's going to be a problem.
Great. Thank you very much, Sharon. We have a question here, or perhaps more of a question/observation that may require a little bit of elaboration, because I have seen this a little bit in the comments. Differentiating between emotional intelligence and quote-unquote real intelligence, would you be able to sort of elaborate on sort of what emotional intelligence is compared to sort of book smarts?
Yeah, so it's the cognitive intelligence versus emotional intelligence, and actually in the handout recommended reading, the article on what emotional intelligence is and is not, there's a URL that goes straight to that. But they talk about cognitive intelligence being that sort of book smarts, maths, being able to solve math problems, spatial relations, that sort of thing. Whereas emotional intelligence is being able to make decisions and judge situations based on being highly attuned to people's emotions and being able to read, connect the dots between a person's emotions and how they got there. So they give an example of someone who was feeling guilty on his mother's birthday. That started out with him feeling sad, and then they couldn't figure out how he was feeling guilty. So there was a sort of a string of events. They went from one emotion to another, and a person with high emotional intelligence would be able to sleuth that out. Just as with cognitive intelligence, we may look at the logic of a situation. With emotional intelligence, we would be able to figure out how a person got from one emotional state to another based on the context of the situation that they were in. So another thing emotional intelligent people can do is they can more accurately perceive emotions just by looking at people's faces. We always have to remember that it's a working hypothesis, but people who actually do have high emotional intelligence are much more attuned to reading other people's emotions and the situations. Does that help?
It certainly helps for me, Sharon. I would imagine that would help clarify it for others as well. And yes, Nasser does indicate that it does help, which the way that you closed that response off leads me directly into a comment that came in from Usama in Cairo, asking about emotional intelligence and, is it a must or how is it recommended for everyone in the company, whatever his or her position? And could you possibly elaborate or expound on how having a good grasp of emotional intelligence could help somebody in their career regardless of position?
Yeah, I think, when I talked about it, if you're at the top, you have the problem of the emperor's new clothes, of people not giving you accurate information because they're afraid of you or they're hangers on, and there's no way they're going to tell you accurate information they wouldn't benefit from. So you're not getting the truth. So you need to be better at reading situations because you're not getting accurate stuff. So when you're lower down in the middle or lower down in the organization, you need to be more self-aware because you don't have as many people looking out for you. So you need to figure out for yourself, and a lot of times we talk about culture as the unwritten rules of how things work. This is what we do. This is who we are. Emotional intelligence helps you tap into culture and become attuned to the unwritten rules. So you're not the odd person out, the one person who didn't figure out nobody eats lunch at their desk. Being 15 minutes early in the United States culture, being 15 minutes early for work is on time. Anytime after that is late because we value clock time above all other things. So figuring out when your boss is angry with you or when a coworker is angry with you, by being attuned to the changes, physiological changes, body language. And it's not always, we can't always read body language accurately. It's like a polygraph. A lie detector will tell if your breathing rate changed, your body temperature changed, your heart rate changed. It won't tell you why. So what we want to look at is a mismatch or a shift in someone's behavior or their tone of voice or something about their physiological facial expressions that's giving us a clue of something. So it doesn't matter where you are in the organization, you're always going to benefit from being more self-aware and being more attuned to the social.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sharon. Now, just on going back to this point and what you were commenting on, or what the way that you responded, you made a reference to the emperor's new clothes, and that type of analogy may not be understood by everyone in attendance today. And so would you be able to just sort of explain what is meant by that, please?
Yeah, so sorry, I just saw that you'd written that. Yeah, so this is the old an old story about an emperor, a ruler, who was fooled into believing that he got a new suit of clothes when in fact the clothes were invisible. But the sycophants, the hangers-on around him, praised him and told him, "It's a fantastic-looking new suit of clothes that you've got there. You look wonderful." And he paraded around the village, completely naked, not recognizing that he was not wearing any clothes at all because of the illusion of so many people telling him, the people around him telling him how great his new clothes looked. So that's what can happen, is it can, people can create illusion, and you can believe what people are telling you, no matter how false it is. If enough of them are saying it, you can actually be blind to practical reality by the people around you. And that's what that story is about, not even realizing that you're parading around with no clothes on at all. I don't know if I did a good job of that.
Yes, that was very thorough. Thank you. This brings us to the end of our webinar today, and so unfortunately we didn't get to everybody's question or comment, and we apologize, but we do need to adhere to the time frame that's allotted for the session, and we did start late, and we wanted to make sure that we got the full 60 minutes in, but we do need to go. There are some handouts available, downloadable resources and materials. So there's a few self-awareness exercise handouts that you can find in the materials panel along the bottom of your screen, as well as a list of recommended reading that has been kindly provided by Dr. Wallace. I'd like to thank Dr. Sharon Wallace for sharing your expertise with us and providing some valuable information that will, of course, benefit everyone's personal and professional lives. We will have more CCI webcasts in December and then again in March of 2019. So please keep checking the CCI Live website for more information about those. We also encourage you to tell your fellow CCI alumni that even if they couldn't attend today's live webcast, they will be able to attend the recording of the webcast on the site's archive page, and more information is going to come with access links, etc., in the coming days. For more information on related CCI alumni, as well as opportunities, feel free to visit the alumni tab at www.nvcc.edu/CCIP. And if you have any questions about the CCI program or CCI Live events, please direct them to ccip@nvcc.edu. And what I'll do is I will just quickly copy those and paste those addresses and URL in the chat window, because I did stammer on one of the addresses, so my apologies there. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. It was a pleasure to see you all online. We look forward to seeing you online again at the next webinar in December. And again, a big thank you to Dr. Sharon Wallace.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Paused. Great. Super.
Oh, great. Thanks. I saw where Dana was talking about ideas for working out stress, and I just noticed that. Yeah, that's exactly making sure you get into your body is what we say a lot too.
Right, exactly.
Spending too much time in your head, just have to go get into your body. Just go for a run or whatever. Thanks for just putting that in there.
And Dana just put in a comment in the presenters-only chat for you, but she can't hear you at the moment because we're not broadcasting audio. So.
Oh, okay.
You can feel free to type something if you want, but it's entirely up to you. The captioner ended up getting disconnected right at the end, so we'll fix that in post-production. And I think it went very well. Now, a quick question with regards to the honorarium. Do you want us to send it? It gets sent via PayPal. Do you want us to send it to the email address that I use to communicate with you, or do you want it sent to? I don't know if your business has an email account, or the place that you work, the Mbira group.
Oh, yeah. Let me get back with you on email with which address that's using.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how you want to deal with it. If you want to deal with it personally or business, that's fine. We'll send it anywhere, but just let us know which one.
Okay. I'll have to check in with the powers that be CPA on that. Yeah, great. Okay, so that went all right.
Yes, I think it went very, very well.
From your perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I was yelling or if I was talking too slow.
No, it's just at one point you started getting into what did she call it? Like a therapy voice type thing. You started sort of getting really sort of soft. And I thought, oh man, better do something about this right now.
And so I got hold of that in time, or I caught your message in time. I guess it wasn't for too long.
Indeed, indeed.
Because I actually
Linda Barron.
Yeah, I was
sorry.
Linda
Linda
right.
Barron. She used to call it her therapy voice.
That's right. Yeah, and it's I made a point of putting my notes up on a book stand. So just for that very reason, I wouldn't just be looking down, because that's part of when my voice starts to dip.
Right.
I think I had gone a little off script there.
No,
you catch me
fine.
with that, but yeah, I every setup is always different. So sometimes I'm using a projector and I'm looking at slide notes I have on each slide, and sometimes I show up and the projector's on the other side of the room, and so are my notes. So I went ahead and stuck them on paper for this, and I thought, the reason I was, I hope it didn't sound too badly like I was reading, but I just,
No.
I just presented something similar, but I presented on emotional intelligence about a week and a half ago to a group, but it was a 2-hour session, and I was like, man, I better have word counts on this one.
No, I think it was very good. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I will speak to you, or I'll wait to hear back from you about the where you'd like the payment sent, and I'll hopefully be in touch at some point in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and let me know if you ever want me to do it again. This was certainly good experience for me.
Good, excellent. No, you did great, and it was nice to have you as the presenter as opposed to being a host or convener. Yeah,
there was I felt like a dork a little bit, because it's like I'm so used to when it comes to the webinar, I hadn't actually been the presenter in a webinar. I'm like, oh, that's quite different from sitting back telling other people what to do. It's
exactly.
Like, oh, yeah, I guess I need to think about pauses, and and you did a phenomenal job with the questions, because they were right in front of me. It really helped having you read and select them and help interpret.
Okay, excellent.
Right. All right. Well, I know you probably need to. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I need to do a bunch of stuff now. So, okie doke.
Okay. Well,
I'll let you go, and look forward to hearing from you.
All right.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Sharon.
Take care.
Okay.
All right. You too. Bye-bye now.